Hello, this is Steve Ramona, your host for Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. I want to thank our sponsors, Infone, and with Infone, you can place your business on everybody's cell phone, turn their business into a web app, and with a click of a button, they'll have access to you 24/7. And also Pantheon.fm. Have you ever thought about monetizing and taking your podcast to the next level? Well, Pantheon can do that. Let us show you how. Reach out to Steve Ramona, the host, at infone.co/SR1, and I will go over with you how you can make your podcast really stand out. Let's enjoy the show. Thanks again, everybody. Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. This is your host, Steve Ramona, and as you know, I have a few guests that talk about veterans and military, but I've got someone that's been in it deep many times, and he's got many stories. We won't have time to cover all the stories, but this is a true servant coming out of the military. He's still serving today. Hey, Colonel David, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve. It's my pleasure.
Why'd you jump in the military?
For me, it was a life calling career. I went to Bowling Green State University, started college just after the Vietnam War. Didn't really know much about the military, and did not do well my first year in college, and was going to drop out. And my father had really our first adult conversation we ever had. And I went to him and I said, I'm thinking of dropping out and joining the military. And he said, I'll support you, but before you do that, go and check the ROTC detachment. And I went by Bowling Green's ROTC detachment, and I walked in, and it's like God's fingerprints were all over it. It's like I was meant to be there. The next time I felt that way was after I graduated and reported to Fort Benning, Georgia, to begin my training as an officer, an infantry officer at the basic course. And really, it was 3 decades later that went by in 3 seconds.
Yeah, I can imagine. What an incredible feeling. Knowing what you're doing is what you should be doing, which is a great lesson for the audience.
It really, for me, it really is. And I, with my sons, so my elevator story is I'm an advocate and a mentor for our men and women in uniform, for their families, for those that have ever worn the uniform, and for our families of the fallen. I'm Bonnie's husband, and I'm the father of 2 amazing young men who have found their purpose and calling. One is a first lieutenant at Fort Cavazos, Texas, as a company executive officer, and the other one is getting his PhD at the Edward R. Murrow School of Communications at Washington State University. And the thing that impresses me so much is they've found their purpose. It doesn't feel like work, just like for me for 3 decades in the military. It's never felt like work. And that's the way our sons, Bonnie and my sons, have found their purpose. And that I found it, and I'm so thankful that they found it. Now, I had very little to do with it. I mean, my oldest son was 7 years old on 9/11. So he and his little brother were growing up. I was either preparing for war, at war, or coming home from war. So Bonnie did an amazing job of raising 2 honorable young men that cherish their mother. And that's the most I can ask.
Yeah, and what a proud moment that one's in the military, one's not. As we talked previously, you just want them to go their path. Whether it's military, great, you said it earlier, but that they found their purpose, no matter what it is, and it's a lesson to be heard.
Well, be and do are the governing words of the universe. who we are and what we do. And when we talk about a servant's heart, when we talk about leadership, and let's define leadership up front. In the military, we define leadership as a process of influencing people. A process of influencing people by providing purpose, direction, and motivation to accomplish the mission or improve the organization. You've heard the old quote, managers manage things, leaders lead people. When you find that ability to lead, to get ordinary people to accomplish amazing things, and you understand that it is about people, and my sons have figured that out. It took me a lot longer. My views on leadership evolved over years of watching young men and women on and off the battlefield go places that most people can't even imagine and do things that they can't even fathom, but they're brave, they're resilient, they're courageous, they're kind, and they're wired to serve. And so moving away from my family and looking at my larger family, which is those that have been touched by military service, and you just find these amazing young people who are going to be making a positive difference in their communities for years to come.
That's such a great statement, because that's what we need. We all, listeners and me and you, know that the world is a different place and it's got some hiccups, but positivity from these men would be fantastic. What's a lesson or two you learned in your military that can help a civilian? Because there's a lot of crossover, I think.
Oh, well, I'll start with this. We have never had a shortage of naysayers and pessimists in the world. We have never had a shortage of naysayers and pessimists in the world. Those that'll stand in the back of the crowd, point to the half-empty glass and exclaim why great things can't happen. I think you have to reject the paradigm of negativity. Rejecting that paradigm of negativity, stepping out, unshackling innovation, and making positive things happen. We can all sit around and bemoan what's happening and be negative towards things that are taking place. The reality is, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So step out, unshackle innovation, make positive things happen. I've seen the effects on esprit de corps and morale when leadership fails and managers take over. Followers hunker down and wait for better days. A fortress mentality kicks in. And so what we have to do is ensure that leadership thrives, managers manage the things, but we do the right things. We don't have to do things right, we have to do the right things. And that comes from that lead from the front, which is born from an attitude. That's where it starts. And not pointing at the half-empty glass from the back of the crowd.
You said something that was quite interesting to me. I've had not too many military people, veterans, tell me is how these men went out and were servants. They were serving. What is you as the leader, because you led a lot of troops, and how do you get the attitude of servant with these men and women, young men and women?
Well, and that's what it is. They're young men and women. And I commanded Diyala Province in Iraq during surge operations, a province the size of New Jersey. And my troops from 3rd Brigade, 1st Cavalry Division, and attachments from other units, to include the 82nd, were given a mission that, quite honestly, most people deemed impossible to achieve. With the size force, we had 5 problem sets in my province when I arrived prior to the surge beginning. We had Sunni resurgence, Shia domination, Kurdish expansion, Iranian influence, and Al-Qaeda. And as all of these came together, Diyala became the most volatile province in Iraq, and Bakuba was identified as the capital, the province. Bakuba was identified as the most dangerous place in the world.
Wow.
And every day, I never saw my soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines demoralized. I watched as they realized that they could accomplish anything. It really, as long as they had the backing of the American people, that they knew that their families were going to be taken care of. But I looked at them and I said, look, the best I can give you is clarity. I can't give you certainty. My orders, my instructions, the enemy situation, which is constantly evolving, not disappearing, is a challenge, and it results in, if you're expecting certainty, you're not going to get it. Certainty in the way the enemy reacts and the situation. So being forthright with them, and then telling them or telling myself and believing that if we were successful, it was because of them. If we were partially successful, it was because of us. And if we failed in our mission, it was because of me. Not giving them proper instructions, not giving them proper collaboration and coordination and resources that they needed to accomplish their mission. So I think that understanding that their understanding of clarity, the enemy situation, and their responsibilities, they took hold of that from the non-commissioned officers, the officers to the commanders, and the junior enlisted on the ground. But we had to communicate. One of the challenges we had was communicating the situation. I remember in one case, we had a soldier up on a roof in Bakuba, and he made a comment to a reporter that we should just blow up this town. That soldier, we realized, didn't understand what he was accomplishing or allowing us to accomplish by being up on that rooftop. What was happening there was impacting our operations in the Diyala River Valley, in Muqtadiya, in Kambani, all of these other areas, geographically and functionally. And we had to go out on a campaign to make sure every one of our service members that were deployed with us in that during that time frame understood what we were accomplishing. And that's important. Once you do that, there's buy-in. They understand why they're up on that roof. They understand why the fight is so important and how they're impacting the larger piece. The reduction in firefights and kidnappings and IEDs and kinetic and non-kinetic operations impacting our ability to accomplish our mission. So when I talk about influencing people by providing purpose, direction, and motivation, that's leadership.
Yeah.
That the systems that are managed all help us to do that: motivation, purpose, and direction.
David, I love that, because yours is extreme, because life and death, what these guys and men and women, were facing, So you take that with a company, I'm not assuming, I know, they follow this same pattern, they're going to get the same buy-in. And guess what happens? You flourish, right?
What you do, you thrive. I would use the word thrive. We all want to thrive where we work, live, and play.
Mhm.
But when we talk, one of the things that we have to understand is, and I worked for a lot of very smart leaders in my 3 decades. And I worked for a lot of great team builders over those same 3 decades. But I really only worked for two that were very, very smart and a great team leader.
Hmm.
And that was General David Petraeus, the force commander in Iraq during surge operations, and Admiral Mike Mullen, the 17th chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And what made Mullen and Petraeus so good was they understood the culture. Admiral Mullen used to say, "My Army," as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And I remember it distinctly that this Navy admiral talked about his army. He understood the way we think, the way we act, and the way we interact with each other. When we talk about culture, that's what we're talking about, the way we act, the way we think, the way we act, and the way we interact with each other. And if the way we act and the way we interact is yelling and screaming or toxic leadership, that culture is going to be affected. Some people say culture is the way things are done around here. I still like the way we think, the way we act, and the way we interact. Our service members, our veterans understand that. They understand the culture. And my leadership style has to adapt to the culture because I'm showing up. But you can't talk about us without talking about our families. So when I talk about where we work, live, and play, you bring that same mentality that you have in your family to the workplace, to where you play, to the basketball court. You have to be present to understand that. What I saw with our service members in combat, both in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then all my deployments to Iraq, was they were present. They had to be.
Yeah.
You don't step on nothing because it could blow up. So you have to be present in the moment. I live across the street from an elementary school, and in back is a playground. And every day I have to walk since I broke my back. And I watched a father pushing his son on the swing. And the little boy was saying, "Higher, Daddy, higher." And the father's pushing him. And in between pushes, he's looking at his phone.
Hmm.
He's looking at his cell phone. Now visualize that. You have to be present to win. So when we talk about culture at the workplace, culture at home, you have to be present to win. You have to be observant, influencing people by providing purpose, direction, and motivation. That little boy was not motivated by Daddy looking at his phone. You have to be present to win, and present in the experience on the battlefield, because if you're not present and you're not observant, you lose. And great leaders are very observant. You see what your people are going through. You see what your people are experiencing. That somebody said to me after my father passed away 2 years ago, said the first time a son faces his own mortality is when his father passes away. That's not true. If you've served in combat, the first time you face your own mortality is in a circumstance where things blow up or they zing past your head. You have to be observant to see how others are reacting to those situations. Purpose, direction, and motivation, influencing people, being present, and participating, because you can't motivate others unless you're a participant and an active participant, but you have to understand the culture of the organization to be able to deal with that. And these young men and women that have been touched by military service are coming home and going to workplaces and communities. You know, I fought for my family, my neighbor, my community, and my buddies on my left and my right. And I come home to my family, my neighbors, my community, and I look for new buddies on my left and my right. And that connection is what enables us when we come home. So it defeats isolation and loneliness, because we expect our families, our neighbors, our community, and our buddies on our left and our right to be observant, to be present for us, and to listen.
Yeah, I like to be present. I've talked to a lot of leadership people and people in the military, but the present one's interesting because what I could think is the president of a company goes, sends the vice president to talk to them, to give a motivation speech. He goes out to lunch with his buddy. Well, that's not being present in front of his company and walking just through the company. You know, they sit at their high tower and they never walk through their employees, being present. That's what you're saying in a sense, right?
Well, what I'm saying is observant, understanding what's happening. We call it battlefield circulation. Moving around the battlefield, understanding seeing ourselves, seeing the enemy, seeing the terrain and weather. You can't do that on a computer.
No.
You can't see the enemy. You can't see yourself, your forces. You can't see the terrain and weather from looking at a map. You have to go out and understand and be observant. And you have to look at and get a sense of how people are acting and interacting, the way we think, the way we act, and the way we interact with each other. Now, this all sounds very simple. It's hard. Because brave leaders have to go to uncomfortable places. If you see a toxic work environment in a subordinate organization, if you see, that's where the next problem is going to be. That's where the next sexual harassment or EO complaint is going to take place. You can see it because you're present, you observe it, you go out and you figure it out. But brave leaders go to uncomfortable places, and they have to have those difficult conversations. I worked with a company, and the leadership said, I hate having hard conversations. I know my own limitations. I am a confrontation avoidance person. I hate having difficult conversations. And my comment to him was, let's change the way you're looking at it. If I tell you you have to have 25 difficult conversations before your company makes $25 million, you're now motivated to have those difficult conversations. We're changing the paradigm. We're changing the perspective. Remove that negative of I can't or I hate but realize that it's going to result in positives. I can't give you certainty, but I can give you clarity that if you have those difficult conversations, because over time, it's going to make the organization better. Brave leaders have to go to uncomfortable places.
like
I told you about, I never saw my soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, or even a couple coasties demoralized. It's not true. I would see after they watch the news in the dining facility on forward operating base Warhorse, the news would be on and there'd be the debates by members of Congress saying that the surge wouldn't work. That without ever being over or experiencing what we experienced, they would say the surge wouldn't work. And I'd watch my service members walk out of the dining facility, then they'd look at me and go, sir, they don't get it. They don't understand. Saying that the surge doesn't work when your service members are deployed forward without getting their opinion or understanding what they're experiencing, we knew the surge would work. But you empower the enemy, especially in an Arab country where what you say publicly is what matters. You can lie behind the scenes, but what you say publicly is what matters. So it empowered them. It's our democracy. You have to understand the culture again. And I would have to let them know that we had leaders above us that were fighting, from the Secretary of Defense and the chairman to the CENTCOM commander to General Petraeus saying, and the ambassador saying, the surge would work, and it did.
Yeah, yeah. That's so well said, and definitely a lot of crossover with business and life, personal and professional, what you're saying. I love. I can have you talk all day, but I do want to talk about the website in your, let's talk about that briefly. We got a few minutes left. What you do with the website, what you're doing with veterans, and the resources you're giving them.
So it's not a resource for veterans. There is a link,
Okay.
Landing page on there with resources for veterans. It's dixoncenter.org, DIXON center.org. In January 2010, Admiral Mullen, I was in charge of plans, policy, and strategy for basically the Middle East minus Iraq, as on the joint staff at the Pentagon. I'd come out of Brigade Command and they sent me to the Pentagon, and no soldier should ever be assigned to the Pentagon. And I was placed in the joint staff with responsibility covering plans, policy, and strategy for the Middle East minus Iraq. And I realized that I had no purpose. You can't militarize policy. I would go to the Situation Room at the White House, sit up against the back wall. I wouldn't speak for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I'd watch these policy discussions taking place with no input from the military because you can't militarize policy. And so I started trying to find a purpose, and I'd go to Walter Reed every day. Breakfast, maybe lunch, maybe dinner time period. I'd go to Walter Reed and visit troops, my troops that were still there, to keep that purpose going. And one day I was called to Admiral Mullen's office, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he asked me, he said, I've heard what you're doing, working with some nonprofits and those sorts of things. And he said, I want you to help me link donors to needs. And I said, and Admiral Mullen and I have this relationship where I understand exactly what he's saying. And he said, people come up to me as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and say, what can I do to help? How can I help returning service members and veterans? And he said, I don't have an officer I can refer them to. I don't have an office I can refer them to. So I'd like you to do that. And we wrote a white paper called The Sea of Goodwill, myself and a major who's now a colonel going into brigade command, John Copeland. Sea of Goodwill, matching donors to needs. And we talked about what our returning service members, veterans, military families, families of the fallen need for quality of life. And it's the foundation is education, and the two sides of the Trinity on that foundation is meaningful employment and wellness services, well-being. That provides quality of life. And he said, okay, go and engage with communities. And it was a very brave thing to do. But what that next 2 years resulted in was a proof of principle, that there was a desire across the country to want to help, but because of the epidemic of disconnection, they weren't sure how. They weren't sure what to do. They knew what we were, that we were veterans, that we'd served on air and land and sea, but they didn't know us. And so I looked at other organizations, think tanks in Washington, D.C. that were focused on policy, but no one was focused on the evolving needs of veterans and their families linked to community-based solutions. So we decided to start the Center for Military and Veteran Services. And we named it Dixon Center for Military and Veteran Services. And Dixon was in charge of my security in 2007 during surge operations in Iraq. And while we were on a patrol one day, one that he didn't have to go on because he'd been wounded 5 days earlier, but he went because I was going out. A sniper shot and killed Dixon. So we named it Dixon Center, not in honor of him, not in memory of him, but everything he represents, the behaviors, the values that he represents for us still. Those loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, personal courage, duty, honor, country, and his behaviors linked to his values. So he represents, he is a person of color, married, third enlistment, second deployment, kids, four beautiful kids, and a wonderful, wonderful wife. And he represented our non-commissioned officer corps very well. So we named it Dixon Center for Military Veteran Services. It's for 11 years, we've been making the lives of veterans and their families better. We have 250 participants across the nation as full-time employees, contractors, consultants, ambassadors, volunteers, working with local communities as a resource. The center is just that. It's not a direct service provider, but rather we are a conduit creating systems change, focusing on the evolving needs of veterans and their families, and helping organizations just to become inclusive as employers, recruiting, integrating, training, and retaining veterans. We work with direct service providers, educators, healthcare providers, nonprofits, about 30,000 organizations and individuals over the past 11 years. And our president is retired Marine Colonel Duncan Milne. Our senior vice president of programs and services, retired Army Colonel Sam Whitehurst, who used to run the Army or Soldier for Life program. And then I get to be the chairman.
That's great.
So I went from one life calling career to another.
And that doesn't happen very often.
I knew what I wanted to do, but with Admiral Mullen's guidance and direction, the needs of our veterans and their families are evolving. They're not disappearing. Yeah. And it's happening at a time when the American people are forgetting about the wars. And we as leaders can't allow them to forget about those that have fought the wars, because we're not going to tolerate another generation of homeless veterans. One of the organizations I work with is Soldier On out of Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And everyone talks about, and rightfully so, we have to talk about the suicides of veterans and military, the death by suicides. There are organizations out there that are stemming that. Soldier On's been around since early 90s, and they've only had 2 suicides in the thousands that they've provided direct affordable housing to, transitional housing and services. 2, we've got to look at those those innovative solutions that are working to defeat the epidemic of disconnection that exists. And we've got to move from a model of crisis intervention to one of crisis prevention. The systems change I'm talking about that the Center for Military and Veterans Services, Dixon Center, is doing is working with local community-based organizations on connecting with the veterans and military families, not creating new programs. We don't need new programs. We need organizations to be inclusive, to integrate the veterans, to train them, to retain them by understanding that if you've met a veteran, you've met a veteran. Yeah. And connect with them in a meaningful ways. They're going to thrive. They're going to make huge differences. But we're not going to tolerate another generation of homeless veterans, and we've got to defeat the disconnect that exists that creates loneliness and isolation.
I love what you're doing. So a vet can reach out to the website, or a family of vet, get inclusive in that and get all the resources that you provide. Organizations
Okay. And employers, educators, healthcare providers. Those are who we work with, but we do have a landing page with resources, and because we've got a lot of partners that are service providers, direct service providers.
Organizations, good. I'm glad you clarified. That's great.
Yeah,
so if you're out there, you want to help vets, this is a place for you to go. And I'm going to connect you with some people like I have already. But we're running out of time. I think I have to bring you back because I've learned so much. This was a great show because I love the crossover, as I said earlier, military to life. If you've never been in the military, I've learned a lot from you and a lot of my military friends about leadership in business, which I think it needs to be out there more. What's one last tip you can leave the audience? You left us so many, but what's something they can take in their journey to help them?
I think that, leadership is what we do. Knowledge is what we impart. Pressure is what we endure. Motivation is what we connect with others on to inspire them. I think that when you look at your individual leadership style, keep in mind that you have to mentor, that you have to go to uncomfortable places, and that you have to understand the unique needs of those that you're working with. Be observant. Great leaders are observant and they're present.